Hi, this is Mary Kay's Positivity Podcast. I'm a yoga and meditation teacher and life coach. I'm also author of several self-help books. I have Linda Abel with me, and she is a functional health practitioner helping hundreds of women 35 and older build muscle, burn belly fat, heal hormonal and gut issues, and boost metabolism. She's really a one-stop wellness center, and I thank you, Linda, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Mary Kay. I'm excited.
I know. I got your name from someone I really trust. She has great wellness resources, and she was saying to me, you've got to have Linda on your podcast. So I'm really excited to hear what you do. So tell me, what turned you on to functional medicine and health in general?
Sure. So it's really always stems from trying to heal yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And my personal journey led me to my professional journey.
Mm-hmm.
So initially, I did personal training and then nutrition. However, I love looking at the whole person.
Mm-hmm.
And with functional health, you're able to get more data and move beyond symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can do really targeted protocols to address health complaints. So that's the primary reason.
You're really an expert on women with hormonal issues and helping them with that disturbing belly fat, because it's the largest complaint I hear from friends, both male and female.
Sure.
So how do you get rid of belly fat? How do you address these hormone issues without drugs?
So it starts by understanding what causes it. It's not a willpower thing, ladies and gentlemen. I know it feels that way when it comes to sugar, but it's really about insulin sensitivity, and that changes over time. So insulin resistance is the state or phase that we're in if we have weight loss goals, or if we're pre-diabetic and then diabetic. That's the later form of insulin resistance. And so the body's ability to metabolize glucose or sugar influences belly fat, and also stress influences belly fat as well, cortisol.
Oh, interesting. So how do you get rid of it?
Sure, it's addressing insulin resistance. There are a number of ways. One of the easiest ways is to go for a walk. So going for a walk, actually, beyond the benefits of just burning calories, you're calming your nervous system, because a stressed body system is a resistant body system. So reducing cortisol supports belly fat loss, and then also supporting your liver. A lot of signals come from your liver in terms of how your body should metabolize glucose and fats. So addressing liver, not necessarily disease, because the allopathic method is disease and treatment. In functional health, it's more about optimal function. So we want to optimally function liver, and you want to improve insulin sensitivity with diet and nutrition. And one of the ways of doing that is reducing exposure to insulin spikes. And you can do that through diet, limiting carbohydrates in terms of macronutrients, or you can also
load up on protein
of belly fat. It really depends on the cause. If it's alcohol-based, then reducing alcohol consumption. If it's non-alcoholic fatty acids, then that's reducing high fructose corn syrup. But most people don't have diagnosis, and that's what the allopathic model supports. So most people with weight loss goals or belly fat goals hang in insulin resistance. And so what we want to do is to help the body become more sensitive to insulin. And the ways to do that is through exercise. It's through nutrition, so optimizing your macronutrients. And then there are supplements that can help with insulin sensitivity as well.
What type of supplements?
Sure. One that I really like is berberine.
Oh,
And
yeah.
berberine, yeah, so it's a natural form of metformin, and it's really beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I like doing macronutrient panels. So this is me as a functional health practitioner looking for nutritional deficiencies that lead to insulin resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have chromium is necessary to regulate blood sugars. And sometimes when I test, I see that is low. So supporting chromium and just ensuring that all nutritional needs are met, because anytime there are deficiencies, that tends to lead to impaired glucose metabolism, which is the precursor for the belly fat.
That's interesting. So why is gut health so critical? Because we hear a lot about it, but what can people do about it?
Yeah, so gut health is critical because that's where your immune system is. And the connection between your gut and your brain is so powerful. And whatever takes place in your gut influences your brain as well. What is it? 80% of serotonin is produced in the gut. And then the gut and the precursors for serotonin is 5-HTP and amino acids. And then you get amino acids from eating protein. So then it's eat enough protein, but are you digesting protein? Are you absorbing protein? Do you have the precursors? So supporting the gut also supports the brain, and your immune system lives there. And you want to build up the army in your gut and then have a better defense for all the invaders trying to get in or invaders that are out in the environment.
So you run blood tests to really learn the story about each person, which is so unique to each person. And then you evaluate where the slowdown is, basically?
Yes. So I start with the intake forms just so that I can have a wide snapshot as to the person's health complaints. And then we have a call so I can glean more information about life history and present day needs. And then after that, I come up with a testing protocol. I can run hundreds of labs. So it's a matter of identifying the appropriate lab for the person. And not only that, the appropriate combinations, because just because someone has an issue with their gut doesn't mean that's the root cause. It could be hormonally related. Getting that data, customizing the lab tests, and then analyzing the results, coming up with protocols. And I also offer the coaching too, because it's one thing to get data, because it's easy to go get tests. So what differentiates me is I implement a coaching protocol. I hold your hand throughout the process because I truly do care if people make progress. That is so important to me.
It's one thing just learning what's happening, but if you don't do anything about it, what's the point about learning what's happening? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell me about brain health and how that affects, say, dementia and Alzheimer's.
Sure. So in terms of brain health, the only part of our body that really needs glucose is our brain. And in terms of dementia or brain disease, it's been linked to amyloid plaquing. But the latest research, they're now calling dementia or Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. It's an informal name. And that's because the thinking is that it's connected with insulin resistance. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because when you're insulin resistant, then you're not getting enough glucose inside of your cells. And if you're not getting enough glucose in your cells, then you're not providing it with the energy that it needs.
Yeah, makes sense. Were you always active and athletic and healthy? And how do you get people to enjoy exercise? Some people are like, I know I need to exercise, but it's hard to establish a habit like that if you are not used to doing anything.
Absolutely no, I wasn't active at all. I started and I do just enough exercise. So I use a lot of science. So I initially got certified as a trainer because I sustained a serious leg injury when I was 19 and plates, screws, and unsure if I'd be pain free. And so I wanted to, for my own acknowledgement, learn all that I can to help the body heal and to participate in my recovery. exercise says a lot about people, the relationship that they're having with themselves. Are they kind to themselves? Are they demanding to themselves? And so once you address that, sometimes addressing that relationship, then people can actually feel the positive sensations from exercise. It's the sensation itself that people grow to love that leads to long-term adherence. And in the short term, if that is a challenge, a habit is like a muscle, you do it over. And that's where coaching can come in, where I can come up with a 12-week plan, and then we can identify challenges and barriers, and then have you get to the health club or the activity, because most of the time, the hardest part is just taking that first step. And then once you get started, then, as I said, a habit is a muscle. You do a little bit here and there, and that's it. And I work with a lot of people that do not like to exercise, but end up saying that they got way more than exercise from working with me as a trainer, that they gain confidence and mind-body connection. So I think a lot of people are not in their body, and so they're not registering the sensations that they're getting from the exercise. And for some people too, because exercise is great, it's also a stressor. So you have to exercise the right way, because if you don't, that can add to the stress. That can make your body more sympathetic.
Right.
And if your body's more sympathetic, then it's going to be harder to lose weight. And then the sensations are uncomfortable. So a key thing is how you register stress. So stress is physical, emotional, environmental, and exercise is stress. When they're feeling the sensation from the exercise, what are they telling themselves is happening? Because your body can think that it's being chased by a tiger, or it can think that you're loving yourself, that it's self-love. So how you interpret the sensation influences how you feel. And I think the reason why they don't like to exercise is because a lot of times they register it as a stressor, and we live in a stressed society, and we want to make people less stressed. And connecting exercise with self-care, and I say self-care equals self-love. So I find that that's beneficial.
That's one of the most important things I've ever heard on a podcast, actually. The way you interpret exercise or doing anything, like how you go into it mentally, will affect the outcome. And nobody says that. But it's so true.
Yeah, it's really true. And I started to think a lot more about it because I specialize, my niche is working with women 35 plus who are weight loss resistant and have belly fat, and stress is a major component of that. With fluctuating hormones, we become more fight or flight. And I'm very sensitive. And so I can tell when someone's nervous system is revved up.
Yeah.
And that's usually an indicator that someone has made demands on the body more than it could give. And now they're dealing with the consequences of it. And if that's the case, then when they're going to exercise, a lot of times they're grimacing. They don't even realize that they're doing it. And even if it's something gentle, so then I just tell them, so it's important that you tell your body that this is something positive. It is a stress. It is a sensation. It may not be comfortable. However, it's something positive. You're practicing self-care, and self-care equals self-love. And that's going to calm your nervous system down. And then you're going to register it, because the body keeps score. And there is a book called that. But body does keep score.
The body hears everything. So what's your biggest health regret in life? I didn't believe sugar was that bad growing up, because I was like, how could something that tastes so good be bad? So that's my biggest health regret. What is yours?
My biggest, sure. I think everything in moderation.
Yeah.
I don't believe everything is in moderation. What I do believe is that you adjust deliverables. So, for example, let's say you have an eating plan and selecting someone that's in maintenance. So they're on an 80-20 eating plan. So you're eating healthy 80% of the time, and you're indulging 20% of the time. So then you add up all of your meals. And then once you add up your meals, then determine the 20%. And that's your maintenance. And then if you're going to travel, then look at your circumstances and your challenge and determine what your deliverable is. So if you're going to Las Vegas, then ideally your deliverable will probably be about 60%, but you have to be realistic and compassionate with yourself. So I don't call it moderation. I just call it an eating plan. So you're never off an eating plan. You're just making adjustments based on circumstances, practicing self-compassion. And then when, the circumstances is right, then you can do more.
What are some of the most important things you've learned from clients?
A lot has to do around limiting beliefs. So one of the first things I have a potential client or prospect do prior to meeting, I ask them what their goals are. And then I ask them to sit in success, because it's one thing to really want something, but if you don't believe that it's possible, then that is a barrier. And you don't have to think about how it's going to happen, but you do need to allow for miracles. And so when you allow for miracles, then that allows room for you and the forces out there in the universe to participate in your efforts. That is something that I have learned, is that in order to reach goals, people really need to be able to sit in success, have the sensation wash over their body. So you sit in success and you close your eyes and just envision what life feels like and what life looks like when you reach your goal, and speak in the affirmative. And that can take weeks
Right.
to really get to the point where you believe it. And you don't have to figure out how it happens. It doesn't matter. You don't have to figure it out, because you need to allow for miracles. And then you have me. So that's it.
I know. I also find that we're living in a world where everyone wants something immediately. Microwaves, you got to have it now. And so even with fitness goals, I feel like if they don't see results immediately, they're like, that's not it. I got to go on to the next thing. And that's what creates all these fads, and everyone's trying to capitalize on the next trend. So what is the time frame people should give themselves in order to see a change or the belly fat decrease?
Sure. So I think the very first step is how you determine baseline and starting point, and what are your metrics for gauging success. So I like to have people do body composition, because BMI, that's the allopathic method, and it's not an accurate indicator of your health, and neither is your weight. So the most accurate indicator of your health is body composition and body fat and visceral fat. So visceral fat is the fat around organs. So when I do an assessment of body composition, or if somebody has an assessment that I can look at, I'm able to determine how long things are going to take. So in terms of visceral fat, if the visceral fat is low, typically you start to see fat loss more quickly, the subcutaneous fat. However, if visceral fat is elevated, then that fat needs to go away first. So
and you don't really see that, so it's hard to measure.
That's why it's good to measure it.
Yeah.
Either by your knee or an in-body, or the gold standards is a DEXA scan. Because when you do that, and then also take measurements too, because we don't just want weight loss, we want size loss. So we want a reduction in body fat and an increase in muscle. We want a composition change. And that may not be reflected on the scale, and so many people utilize the scale. So measurements is key, because our eyes deceive us. So I even also recommend taking a before video. It's about 3 months to see significant results, and then 6 months to reach maintenance. Once you reach homeostasis, weight releases, and that's the fastest way for it to happen. And it's so important to identify foods that you're sensitive to, because when you're sensitive to foods, your body creates water around that food. So even if it's not to the threshold of allergy, which is the allopathic method, what I look at is sensitivity. So I'm looking at antibodies. And so that is your body's defense with regard to the proteins in whatever foods that you're eating. So your body can be mounting a defense whether you have symptoms or not. For example, I don't get any symptoms from gluten that I know of. I've been trying to isolate. I haven't been able to. However, I avoid it because I have elevated antibodies for gluten. So that is my reason for avoiding it, even though I don't have quote unquote symptoms, because symptoms can range from gluten, from migraines,
I think
or
everyone should be gluten-free because
100%.
yeah, gluten is really just your body's allergic reaction to the poison that's sprayed on these fields. Not everyone becomes sensitive to it yet, but eventually everyone will. I see people joking about the gluten-free person at the party and what a hassle. And I'm like, actually, all of us should be doing that.
Yeah, I find that what leads to adherence to, I love the science behind things and I love how everything connects. And I love to provide that with clients, and especially when it comes to gluten, because gluten is a challenge, especially because all the fun stuff have gluten in it.
Right.
But I've seen people with severe reactions in terms of gut bloating. And then another thing about gluten too is the threshold to get diagnosed with celiac is so high. And that's what most people are waiting for, is that diagnosis. But they're waiting for as much damage as possible to give you that diagnosis. So this is why sensitivity is so important. And oftentimes what I also see is typically a correlation between celiac or gluten sensitivity and Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune hypothyroidism.
I have a whole theory about that, but that's another podcast. I want to ask for young people that might want to go into your line of work. What's the hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of my job, I am self-employed, so I would say it's managing a business. The work itself is so easy, and I enjoy the things I have to learn, so I am grateful. And so that part makes the other difficult parts more manageable. But I would say you certainly have to be a self-starter and really structure your time. And also, you really have to know yourself. For me, I find that managing energy is better than managing time because I'm very sensitive. Because I would overdo it and then have to recover for days. So now I listen to signals that my body tells me. And that's a way to practice self-care. And that's a way to have self-boundaries. So I think understanding what your weaknesses are and trying to overcome them, and then also managing your energy levels, and then just managing business. I think that's the most challenging part.
Because it does look like a dream job for a lot of people, but obviously you have to continually keep a streamline of business. And not everyone is a great marketer. So I was just curious. Yeah.
Well, in terms of getting the clients and things of that nature, I get a lot of clients from Google and I get referrals as well. Because one of the advice I would give is to definitely invest in your website, because I found out the benefits of that during COVID when you couldn't see a lot of people in person. It's a relatively new discipline. Everyone thinks that they can be a coach, but just because you're an expert in a subject doesn't mean you can facilitate others in learning or adopting a change.
And so many more people feel sick, have unexplained weight gain or even weight loss, and don't feel well. And we have a real epidemic. So I'm sure the business is booming and we need to figure out why.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's true. A lot of it is stress and a lot of it is toxic burden. Right. And the way I view it is stress is like a bucket. And then you want to have as minimal stress as possible because you don't want your bucket to overflow. Because once it overflows, that can trigger migraines. That can trigger a whole host of conditions.
Right.
And so what you want to do is to identify the stressors. But a lot of people don't even know. People are not able to determine whether they're even stressed or not, because if life is so stressful, you have to meet the demands of life. And that shows up in the body too. So it takes time for people to make those connections with stress. And that is something that I help people with because of my sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
And the point I was making was that stress and toxic burdens are in a bucket. And what I do is essentially try to reduce the load. And that's by exercising. That's by identifying internal stressors, foods that you're sensitive to, or dysfunction in digestion, dysfunction in hormones, because all those are stressors. And then there's physical stressors as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody has a lot of physical pain or they have movement pattern dysfunctions, that is a stressor as
Mm-hmm.
well. So
Right.
we want to reduce inflammation. That is key. And because inflammation is a stressor
Mm-hmm.
as well. So we want to reduce physical stress, emotional stress, and then also environmental stresses. So I test too around mold and heavy metals that
Mm-hmm.
could be present in the body, especially if people are exhibiting symptoms.
Because that can cause some malfunction with brain health too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When it comes to the brain and what I have seen, and this is anecdotal evidence,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of what I'm noticing is blood sugar is really the key to all of these things in terms of health. Because I've seen correlations, because I have people wear continuous glucose monitors, so then I'm able to see patterns and find trends. And I've seen a lot of correlation with insomnia at night, waking up between 1 and 3, because people are getting hypoglycemia, a severe drop in blood sugar around that time. And then your body has to utilize cortisol to rev your body systems up to compensate for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why sometimes you wake up and your heart rate is elevated.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the response to the dip in blood sugar. And if we identify that, all you have to do is just work on food timing and work on macronutrient portions.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of diet, the goal is to heal the body and to help the body balance in terms of the autonomic nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So when you eat, you should feel full. You should have energy. You shouldn't be craving sweets. And
Mm-hmm.
if you have weight loss goals, you should lose weight in time. So that's what needs to happen if we're eating optimally.
Mm-hmm.
Food combinations in terms of our percentages of macronutrients and even within the macronutrients, the optimal types of carbs to combine with the optimal types of protein. So yes, you can have a carb and you can have a protein, you can have a fat, but what is the optimal type? Because even with protein, there's like high purine protein, low purine protein. So high purine protein is more, so if your nervous system is more erratic, more fight or flight, then you want higher purine protein, so that's going to calm your nervous system down. But depending on your test results, because sometimes people come back as fast oxidizers, meaning that the food that they consume, it just burns really rapidly. And then some people's metabolic type is also mixed. So that means you need a balance of macronutrients in order to reach a balance. And then some people's metabolism is slow. So if the objective is to feel full and to have energy and not crave carbs and then lose weight, we need to optimize your macronutrients.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that with food and you can do that with lifestyle. So that is really the key too. It's just homeostasis, having a balanced nervous system. So to go back to the sugar, so I consider myself a recovering sugarholic. So it's
Me too.
So the thing about sugar is we need to realize that it's not willpower.
Mm.
So the way I'm able to avoid sugar, it's not that I never indulge, but the way that I'm able to avoid it. So I just don't get the cravings.
Mm-hmm.
And so I eat strategically, and I can help clients with that too, to optimize their macronutrients and then optimize food timing so that blood sugars are stable.
Mm-hmm.
So stable blood sugar definitely leads to not having cravings. And then eating enough protein certainly helps as well. Yeah.
I've really appreciated all this information. It's so helpful. And just going back to when you were talking about reframing your mind when it comes to exercise so that you let go of negative thought patterns. That's Really great advice. Is there anything else that you think is important for our audience to know?
I really just want to emphasize the importance of insulin sensitivity. And it's not about how much you weigh or anything like that. And it's not about being pre-diabetic or diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, our allopathic system, they're not in the preventative business. Mm-hmm. And because if they were, what they would be doing is running a HOMA-IR test to test for fasting insulin, because years before prediabetes, you lived in insulin resistance. However, they're not testing that. So you're just saying that your insulin is still doing the work that it needs to keep your blood sugars in range. Mm-hmm. However, if you have the information about the levels of your insulin and that it's rising, then you can be proactive. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times people think the damage happens at being diabetic, but no, prediabetes, all the oxidation, it's not free. There's consequences to all of that. So there's like a time frame, sometimes up to 15 years, that you can start to intervene that plays a role. Mm-hmm. And another thing too is women and hormone replacement therapy. That's important as well. I have my personal feelings about hormone replacement therapy, but what I want from my women is to be educated and make educated decisions and to speak to unbiased people.
Right.
There's a lot of biased people out there, and a lot of people do not know the consequences to taking hormones, and there are consequences to not taking hormones. So people need to realize that as well, because you're estrogen deficient. So that raises your risk of heart disease, that raises your risk of diabetes, that raises your risk of dementia, because again, with the insulin sensitivity. So that you don't necessarily need to have symptoms in order to speak to your provider, especially if you're perimenopausal, menopausal, or post. You can start asking questions now and try to find a provider. And I have some in my network that's not biased. It's just going to educate you. I just want people making informed decisions, because no matter how old you are, you can become the best version of yourself, because that's going to help support your independence and impact your quality of life. I have clients who are 83 who lost a whole bunch of weight. And for me, I don't see age at all. I don't see limitation. One of the ways of managing pain is to reduce inflammatory markers so that you don't get the signals sent by your central nervous system to your brain.
Right.
And so that is one of the ways that you can do it. And then another way is to improve your movement patterns, because having poor movement patterns also contributes to inflammation, which also contributes to pain. And then watching what you eat. So I have hardware in my shin. It's a plate and 6 screws, because my shin, when I got into the car accident, it was smashed to smithereens. But I have absolutely no pain at all. I hike. I can wear high heels. And that's because I get to root cause issues. And then so addressing movement pattern dysfunction, that's a way to improve pain. Also, addressing movement pattern dysfunction, that's a way to improve pain. And then I eat a low inflammatory diet, and that's another way to reduce inflammation as well. That's really the secret, really identifying dysfunction in movement patterns and then addressing it, and then reducing inflammation and oxidation in the body. So I don't look at age at all.
So how can people get in touch with you and learn more? Could they do courses with you on Zoom, or how do you work?
Sure. So you can absolutely work with me on Zoom. So if you're interested in learning more about my Weight Masters group coaching, so that you can learn habits around weight management, then you can visit welltakencareof.com/Weight Masters. And then you can feel free to fill out the form and then get on the wait list, and you'll be notified when the program launches. So I work with people in person, the fitness aspect, sometimes virtually for fitness, and most of the time the functional health and the health coaching is virtual.
So what's your website?
Sure, it's welltakencareof.com.
Thank you, Linda, so much for all this information. And I really appreciate your time and great advice, and hope to have you on again soon.
Sounds good. And you can also find me on Instagram or online, and it's at I am well taken care of. So you can search that and find my Instagram. You can find my Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. Too many people are embracing a decline, and you don't have to embrace a decline. You can participate in your health, in your recovery, whatever you're going through, and come out of it. You just have to have a plan and have someone that can guide you, and then be open to miracles.
Right.
The ideal state to be in is to envision your goals. Do not figure out how to get from A to Z, because sometimes you can't, because then you allow for miracles. You allow life to intervene, life to bring the right person, life to send the right message through an ad on television, life to get a phone call from a friend. So that is extremely important.
Yeah. Thank you again.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Please find a comfortable position and just open yourself up to miracles, to possibility, allowing yourself to become a magnet for health and abundance and serendipity. It's not just about thinking positively, but about believing positively. And this can look like exercise. It can be a walk in the woods, getting the right amount of sleep, setting and pursuing goals, and cultivating relationships and connection, practicing gratitude, and then challenging those negative thoughts so you can reverse them, showing kindness to those around you. This is preparing your mind to heal your body, and it's really important to take the pressure off yourself, to love who you are, to love your body, to really reframe your mind, because it's such an extremely powerful psychological tool, so that your thoughts create a beautiful experience in life. Take a deep breath in and a long breath out. Now just relax the muscles in the face, unclench the teeth, relax the jaw, soften the brow, and let your arms feel loose and heavy. Your hips relax. And release the tension in your back, your upper back, your lower back, the top of the legs, the back of the legs. Now release all mental and emotional and energetic blocks that are stopping you from receiving and experiencing more love, prosperity, and perfect health. You are a magnet for success. Everything always works out in your favor. Your potential is limitless. You are in love with what you do. Take a deep breath in, inhaling all the beautiful energy all around you. Exhale and release the toxic energy, anger, worry, sadness, envy. Let it leave the body. See if you can just start to believe in the impossible. That's how you find luck. You just believe you can do anything. You believe you are lucky. You believe everything works out. You have a mental image of yourself that is successful and strong with a can-do attitude. Your self-concept is powerful and positive. Thank you for joining us today. Namaste.